we do not want the genocide in Gaza to begin again. For a two-state solution and establishing ceasefire, we continue backing the steps. On this topic, we are ready to fulfill our parts. The international community shall also continue the pressure on Israel. Esteemed members of press, Israel, since the ceasefire, has killed 250 Gazans. These attacks provoke Palestinians and they must be ended as soon as possible. In terms of humanitarian aid, Israel is also not fulfilling its part. According to the agreement, 650 trucks and 50 fuel trucks would be allowed to enter, but we do not see this amount entering.
Turkey's Foreign Minister there, Hakan Fidan, addressing the media after meeting foreign ministers from 6 other countries. They have been discussing the implementation of the Gaza ceasefire, also how to make sure that more humanitarian assistance enters the enclave. With me in the studio, Sami Al-Arian. He's the director of the Center for Islam and Global Affairs at Istanbul Sabahattin Zaim University. Sami, there are clearly 2 timelines here, because this 20-point plan, we're still in maybe, well, the first phase that isn't working perfectly, shall we say. So we're well away from the second and third phase. The minister said regarding the first phase that Israel must stop violating the ceasefire and fulfill its duty on humanitarian access for the people of Gaza. He says that more pressure needs to be put on Israel. But what pressure?
Well, the only pressure that works with Israel is American pressure. So if Turkey, which has good relations currently with the United States, now it's also being backed by 6, 7 other countries, should go to the United States and says, this is your plan, this is what you set in motion, but Israel is violating, is in breach of this plan, so you need to put some pressure on it, particularly on the issue of aid and also on the issue of allowing the excavation equipment, the heavy equipment, to go there so that they can remove the rubble.
In terms of the violations of the ceasefire and attacks, Benjamin Netanyahu said about 24 hours ago, there are still pockets of Hamas in areas which we, the Israeli military, control, and we are systematically destroying them. So it's not really a ceasefire. It's kind of one side saying, we're going to attack, and then we're going to say the ceasefire is back. We're going to attack, and then we say the ceasefire is back. And the Gazans are just at the mercy of Israeli bombs and bullets.
For Israel, the ceasefire is you seize, we fire. That's basically what they are applying. The same thing is happening in Lebanon. Hundreds and possibly thousands of violations taking place in southern Lebanon, and now we have over 250 Palestinians dead just after the ceasefire was announced. So it's not clear this is going to stop unless, again, real pressure is put. And when we say real pressure, there has to be consequences to these breaches. Israel cannot just enjoy this being unaccountable for the international community. There has to be more pressure on it from that standpoint so that it can comply with what the international community is demanding.
These issues that are to be addressed in the second and third phases of Donald Trump's plan. The Stabilization Force, Hakan Fidan said, we are ready as Türkiye to do whatever we need to do to fulfill our part, speaking on behalf of all the countries represented there in Istanbul, but we need first to see an agreeable framework. An agreeable framework is the rules of engagement, maybe?
Well, it's more than that. It's just what kind of stabilization force, whether there's going to be a United Nations Security Council resolution that gives it a mandate, and then you can specify the rules of engagement. Here, Turkey is trying to be very positive, very constructive about this. They're trying to contribute whatever it takes to make sure, first and foremost, that the ceasefire holds. For that to happen, you need a stabilization force, because these could be the troops that can prevent the Israelis from having a free hand in killing more Palestinians. And I think that's what Turkey is trying to press. The United States plan, Trump's plan, basically calls for a stabilization force. So this is within the framework of that. Now, what kind of countries will contribute to this? There have been 4 or 5 different countries. Turkey wants to participate. Israel is objecting to this. The United States is trying to find somewhere in between.
Is there an understanding in terms of the stabilization force and how it would be accepted by armed groups in Gaza? And I say armed groups because they go beyond Hamas. What do we understand their position would be?
All of them are in agreement as long as it is from friendly countries, meaning Turkey, Pakistan, Egypt most likely, but Egypt says that for it to participate, there has to be a Security Council resolution. Israel is against that because that will limit the ability of the Israelis to have free hand in trying to intervene militarily. But all in all, I think Trump's plan calls for such a force, and somehow it has to exist because that's the only way you can keep law and order on one hand and make sure that the Israelis will respect ceasefire.
It's quite clear that no country can be definitive as it would like to be because of the lack of clarity around the process and what's happening on the ground. And this also was illustrated here in the idea about the Transitional Authority, which should be Palestinians running Gaza on behalf of its Palestinian residents. Will Israel demand a veto on that? Will it try to nix anybody it doesn't want?
It will try, but it has no right to do so.
But it might because it has the guns.
It does, but at the end of the day, the Egyptians, the Arab and Muslim countries have already agreed on that framework, which is to have a 15-member transitional management board, so to speak. These are people who have no relations to any political or military faction in Gaza. They've already been picked by the Egyptians, by the way, and the Americans had no objection to that. So whether or not Israel says yes or no, I don't think what Israel could do is actually intervene in terms of the aid coming and the construction equipment coming. And I think at the end of the day, if Trump wants his plan to succeed, he cannot just accept whatever Israel vetoes is trying to impose on this. At the end of the day, we need to see a ceasefire, reconstruction, withdrawal, everything that's being called on in his plan.
Sami Al-Arian, thanks. You've been spending a few hours with us on this day because of this event and how the rest of the world, the outside world, can influence what's happening in Gaza. Really appreciate you.